All right, this is the Christmas update. This has been about 2 months since the last update, and it has been a big one. Um, I am I don't know, I may have mentioned this before, but my first child is due March 1st. So I think this past 2 months, it kicked in. Like, I need to just kill it. So, probably the most productive 2 months in a long time. Um, so let's jump into what's changed. The first major change is abilities. Abilities used to be attack was somewhat hard coded in the sense that there was a function called attack, and then resolve combat was another function, and it did a hard coded attack had a strength, and resolve combat looked at a hit point attribute of a unit, and then it would figure out damage and take away hit points, which is pretty rigid when you think about it. It should be more like you could attack someone's strength, you could attack someone's hit points, you could attack someone's walking speed, you should be able to attack anything. So basically, and obviously saying this out loud, you're like, obviously that's how it has to be done. But when you're iterating on code, proof of concepts, you just don't realize how flexible things need to be. So we have abilities, and each ability has modifiers, and each modifier affects an attribute. So it's a much more flexible system in that I can attach an ability to a character, to a squad, to an arrow, to a rock, to a wall, to anything. And each unit has a handle ability function, which will, so if they run into a wall with spikes, the wall triggers the ability, which passes the modifier onto the unit, which affects the unit's attribute. So I've removed any reference of the idea of combat being two things fighting. Dug out all the code and implemented it the proper way. So a couple examples just to show real quick. One is sprint. It needs to have a cooldown timer. It can only be used so awesome. It also needs a duration. It only lasts for a certain amount of time. It can only be done when the unit is moving and not in combat. And it affects walking speed. Like, that's an example of one ability, and that touches a lot of the code from, lot steering behaviors to unit attributes to the update loop. Yeah, everything has to just be flexible and accommodating for this type of ability. So that works, as you can see here. And then another type of ability is the ability to do NPC units. So these are units that are controlled by AI, but they're not enemy and they're not player controlled, and they have less health. So can easily apply a modifier to hit points. And the AI is now driven by abilities also, so that the AI no longer says, I'm a ranged unit, I should go here to attack. It says, I'm a unit with all of these abilities, let me evaluate each one, and now I know what to do. So that works. Another complex example is the trebuchet. It has a ranged ability, but then it also has a physics impact, whereas an arrow has a logic impact, I guess, when it's reached its duration. So now we're actually checking, does the rock hit the unit? If so, it does a ton of damage. And then it triggers a secondary ability, which is an area effect, which will do splash damage. So chained abilities are working throughout the code. Anyway, a lot's going on, and it's pretty complex. I made a table just to track, as I implement things, what works and what doesn't. Because every time I revisit abilities, it just takes a while to get up to speed on just how much code it touches. Anyway, it's all dug out, and it could be used on any game I make. It's not specific to my game, and that's probably the best part of all. That leads into experience. So I've also implemented a rough proof of concept of experience screens. Units can, as they fight or as they use abilities, they're rewarded experience, and at the end, the experience is saved to a file, and which is persistent. But it's also tied to a JSON file, which uses the unit's level to read what abilities they should have. So the basics of leveling up work now too, where if I hard code a unit to have 100 experience, he'll get the new abilities that come with level 2. So that's kind of in place. Next is, you'll see, or I've already shown you the hills level. I have a first pass of the hills level and the nav mesh for that. It's also revealed which code is redundant. I optimized some of it still to do, but it helped implementing a second level to get that. We also have the new unit, the Ice Guard. Adding units is just super easy now. I just have to make the heraldry, the shield, which is not long actually. It's just like a 15-minute process. And then, speaking of the heraldry, another thing I did, which was like a 20% performance gain of CPU, the heraldry used to be a crop node. And I didn't realize, I mean, they say crop nodes don't perform well. I just didn't realize how well or how horribly they performed. By making it a crop node and then turning that crop into a texture, and leaving it as a texture throughout most of the frames, and then a unit dies and the hit point ticks away, turn it back into a crop node for one frame and take a new picture of the texture and then make it a texture going forward, just saved a ton of CPU. So it's a crop node only during change, and then it turns back into a texture. Huge gains, huge performance gains. So basically, I'm going to go throughout anywhere I have crop nodes, they're gone. They're going to be turned into textures. Okay, so that's on the coding front. That's what got done. On the story front, we have basically a scripting engine in battle cutscenes that allow, powered by state machines, where I can run scripts that do things. Send waves, pause units, play stories, all of that, which you can see. That same code also works on the world map. So I have world map travel dialogue to show progress and also continue the story. Third on the story is Brian's continuing to work on the videos, and here's a shot to look at. It's nice to see it's always cool to see what can be done with a static image to kind of bring it to life. And then last is the decision screen, which it's not the final look of it, but it shows it works. You can make choices and they get saved. So that's a lot of progress. Similar to that is frameworks. Frameworks are, any programmers listening to this will know it probably should have been that way from the start, but I didn't branch things down to frameworks from the start because I'm still learning game development. So it was more about iteration and less about polished code. But now that I'm thinking more in terms of time to make a beta, I'm thinking more of production code. So like things, sending waves out, just waves of units with amounts and locations that spawn, with callbacks of wave will start, wave did start, things like that. That's now a framework, completely isolated, has nothing to do with my game, could be used in any game. I'm just importing it. So I have these frameworks. That's just one. I have an audio framework that does positional audio. It also does randomization of audio. So if you have 7 death sounds, it'll randomly pick one. And you can also adjust the frequency so that it only happens 50% of the time or 25%. So a whole audio service independent of my game is now written. The scripting cutscene engine I mentioned is, while the assets are similar to much tied to my game, the code is standalone. And then all of these things have documentation. I'm using Jazzy to really build out the docs. They're still not done, but just a lot. It's just a lot better and a lot easier to work with and a lot less bugs. So progress there. Finally, the biggest milestone of all is distribution. I have a build working through test flight installed on 3 other devices. And this is huge because I have a platform that I can iterate on finally. I don't feel like I'm making independent parts just to show, oh, I know how to walk, I know how to attack. Like, the game's far from fun, not even close to fun right now, but it is there. The framework is there, and I just need to polish, iterate, add features, balance, time. Like, I'm going to iterate on the first 3 levels probably for 6 months just to get it to the point where I think it's fun, and then I'll test on more people. But for now, I'll just open it up to like 10 people over the next couple months, people who have helped work on the game. So progress, it really helps with the motivation, and hopefully, next update I carry this forward and have just probably a reasonably feature complete level 1. But we'll see how it goes. That's all for now. See ya.